Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Cheska. I'm a game designer at Fullbright and curriculum director with Code Coven. I hold an MFA in game design from New York University, so shout out to all my Game Center folks who are jamming this year. And I just want to be one of the first people to say happy Global Game Jam. And I'm really looking forward to helping you kick off this awesome event this year. So, I've participated in Global Game Jam annually since 2013. It's an event that I really look forward to every single year. And even though we're all remote this year and the format is a little bit different, I hope that you can still use this time to unleash your creativity, try new things, collaborate with new people, and just make some really weird and awesome stuff. To get you started thinking a little bit outside of the box and encourage you to take on new challenges this year, I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience working with alternative controllers and electronics and how it's kind of changed my perception of tech and games and how we interact with them. In 2018, I made a game called Hellcouch with my collaborator Carol Mertz. It was a game that you play by sitting on a couch to perform the sacred butt ritual and exorcise a demon that's living inside of the couch. When we brought the game to GDC, we received quite a bit of attention, including this interview and article from John Warren that claimed we were heralding the arrival of butt-controlled gaming. The gameplay of Hellcouch is fairly simple, kind of a Simon Says type game that tells you which cushion to sit on. But it turned into this captivating and fun experience because of the alternative controller element. It was over the top, really silly, and offered a fully embodied gameplay experience. I mean, how often do you get to play a couch, right? Controllers, the ones that we often use for playing games, are standardized input devices that we've developed to be able to, input our commands to a piece of software. When we use standardized controllers, we can participate in really emotional moments, even commit like a brutal murder just by pushing a button. So, really, our actions become somewhat abstracted by this input device that we're using. If we think about traditional controllers, like gamepads, mouse and keyboard, touchscreen devices, basically anything that is mass produced and designed to enable players to interact with a huge variety of games, anything that isn't that is an alternative controller. I can't even begin to tell you how many incredible alternative controller projects exist. I'll cover a few in this talk, but people's creativity is really limitless. There are games where you dress up, household objects become gamepads, or we can be delighted by lights, touch, and sound. I think just all the work coming out of this space is extremely fascinating. Shake That Button, which is an awesome website cataloging alternative controllers, says that they can include DIY controllers, arcade cabinets, hijacked traditional controllers, installations, and even playful performances. All these games are designed to make us play differently, not only with our fingers, but with our whole body, to make us experience new feelings regular controllers can't provide. And definitely for me, when I think about it, those are the two big things that define an alternative controller. So there's that sense of complete embodiment in that gameplay experience and with that interface, but also this element of heightened emotion in a way which I think can only really be achieved when we are making a custom design that is curated and special for that game. As an example of this, I wanted to talk about a project that I really, really love. It's called The Book Ritual. I'll read the description from the developer's website and tell you a little bit about why I love it. Write in your book to tell it about yourself. Deface its pages in creativity exercises so that your book can understand you. Tear out pages to keep the conversation going, as it reveals to you how it came to be and why it wants to know you. The book ritual is about dealing with loss and accepting grief. The process of tearing up a book allows players to live out the experience of loss and examine the emotions that arise. So I think this is incredible because this is a game that is completely designed around this emotion-first kind of experience, made possible by the alternative controller elements. So you're making the player physically destroy these artifacts, right? Books that we've placed sort of this importance upon. You know you're not really supposed to destroy them. And by having them go through that physically, they are experiencing this feeling of loss or guilt. And I think that's just really cool. As another quick example for an alternative controller that elicited a huge emotional response for me, I wanted to also give the example of ABC by one of my NYU cohort peers, Claire. This was a project where she took chewed bubble gum and covered an entire controller with it. I really could not look at it without getting physically ill. And I think it's gross, but it's such a cool example of a hijacked traditional controller that completely changes your experience interacting with it and with the software. So you might be thinking, I have no experience working with electronics. I've never done this before. How do I get started making my own alternative controllers for my games? So I'm going to talk a little bit about resources. This is an Arduino board. Think of it as an adorable mini computer. The board has a microcontroller which can run code and receive inputs from a variety of sensors. This is what we used to make Hellcouch, and we're just one of many projects worldwide which are being powered by Arduino. And this is a Flora developed by Adafruit. So this is another microcontroller. It's Arduino compatible, and this one is developed specifically for wearables. So if you're looking into e-textiles or making costumes for your games that you want some sort of electronic component to them. And so, as I mentioned, these microcontrollers can receive inputs from sensors, which you can hook up to them and use as input for your games. So there are so many different types of sensors that you can use. Some examples I'll show here are bend sensors, which can detect the degree that something is bent. You could also use sensors like a motion detector, a temperature detector, all of these sorts of different things that are just taking inputs from the environment or from your player. And here are some really cool examples of homemade sensors made out of just conductive material. So this one is conductive slime that is being used as a stretch sensor. And this one is a crocheted stretch sensor. So when you pull it apart and the fibers become tighter, it conducts electricity better. And once you start delving into the world of electronics, there's so many cool things you can do, not just with alternative controllers and games. Did you know that you can 3D print fabric? You could also 3D print onto fabric. You can buy conductive thread, fabric, tape to make garments that are also circuits and conduct electricity. So as I said earlier, you could make an alternative controller for your game that is a costume. And really, wearable tech is nothing new. It's something we're seeing more and more in our environment, in our day-to-day. And there's lots of really cool examples of sort of like alternative controller style things being used in larger applications. I'm extremely inspired by creators like Kaho Abe, who are working on costumes as controllers. And I had the privilege of working with Kaho, and she was the one who actually got me started working with electronics. I'm just like immensely, immensely grateful for that. These are wearable components with which the player performs actions to participate in the game. So their entire body and their movement becomes an input device. Hotaru is an example here, which Kaho describes this as a shooting game about holding hands. So players perform gameplay actions by striking poses, which makes Hotaru this fully embodied experience. So your body is your controller. And the gameplay here is totally centered around gestures that you actually do and perform, and touch as well. You can make a sensor out of almost anything that is conductive, which is why it's really fun to work on alternative controllers just at home in your house, and creating different input devices for games. You can go to the store and you can buy a sensor that looks like this, or you could home make a sensor that looks like this. This is from a game I worked on called Shark Attack with, this is like a glove that was made with conductive fabric. So this was our input device for the entire game. Ultimately, alternative controllers are about designing specifically for player embodiment and thinking about how they're going to navigate certain spaces or interact with one another if you're designing a multiplayer game. Hellcouch is a game about sharing space. We wanted to think about how do people sit on couches? How do they share that space? What are the sort of unspoken rules or societal norms of sitting together on a couch? Something that is important to mention, though, is that due to the physical element of Hellcouch, it was an extremely inaccessible game. Alternative controllers have the opportunity to be accessible due to how specifically they are designed, and organizations like Able Gamers and Warfighter Engaged have created custom, adapted, hijacked game controllers for people with disabilities. As an example of this, here's an Xbox One controller that was hacked and adapted to be used with only one hand. Alternative controllers are often ephemeral. They're usually showcased or installed for events, and you can't just go to the store and buy one. This enhances the spectacle of them. They're truly special experiences. Speaking of the wonderfully ephemeral, the last project I want to talk about quickly is a performance art game put on by Amanda Hutchins. This game is called One Night Only, and players went on stage wearing costumes and put on a performance while playing a rhythm game. To conclude their performance, players were prompted to smash their guitar on the floor. So this game, One Night Only, was played just once at Bit Bash in Chicago. 16 guitars were destroyed, and at the end of the night, the code for the game itself was deleted as the show finished. And just like, how cool is that, honestly? What an experience to be able to play that game, or to be in the audience for those performances, knowing that it will never happen again. I spent so many years being really terrified of anything related to hardware, electronics. I just thought that it was beyond me, and I couldn't understand it because I didn't have a strong programming background. And I do want to mention that this is playful. Alternative controllers, anyone can make them, anyone can design them, and ultimately there's such a great community that is teaching and sharing knowledge around alternative controllers. So please, if you're at all curious about it, I really encourage you just to do a little bit of research, get started. I'm always happy to share more knowledge as well. And before I wrap up, I do want to share just a bunch of resources and places that you can go to get more information about alternative controllers. So websites like Arduino.cc. Arduino is also open, it's an open source platform, which is awesome. You can also check out adafruit.com, sparkfun.com, instructables.com, Micro Center, even if you're based in the US, they sell kits, LED strips, individual components. And if you're looking for more information on what's out there in regards to alternative controllers and embodied play, you can check out websites like Shake That Button and Alt Control GDC as well. So I do need to wrap up because I'm just about at time, but if you are at all interested in learning more about alternative controllers and getting started with them, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Chesky. You can also shoot me an email. It's hello@cheska.games. I'm realizing the closed captioning is definitely going to mess up all of those links, so I will also write them below this video. So thank you so much for spending this time with me. Happy Global Game Jam, and make something weird. Make something weird. That's it. That's all I have for you. Bye!